I'm not sure if my story will capture anyone's attention, as confessions like these often make people think that such things happen to others, but not to themselves. That's exactly what I used to believe, until something changed. My experience reflects the reality of today's world, where loyalty is no longer seen as a virtue, but more like a joke. I got married quite young, at the age of 19, during my third year of college. My wife, who is a year younger than me, was the perfect partner to start a family with. In our first year together, we were blessed with the birth of our son, and 8 years later, our daughter joined our family. After finishing my education, I joined the Army, where I earned a good salary. This allowed my wife to stay home and focus on raising our children instead of working. I spent a lot of time both at home and overseas. During this time, I was honored with a few medals and unfortunately, also sustained a shrapnel injury to my back. At 42, I was honorably discharged from the military. After leaving the Army, I returned to my previous career at a well-known metallurgical company. 5 years later, I was promoted to Deputy General Director and became a co-owner. Money was never a problem for me, and even now, at 60, it still isn't. My wife is now 59, and we've been married for 41 years. At the time I'm sharing this, everything seemed to be going well. Our children had grown up and followed careers in law enforcement. My son became a colonel in charge of a department, and my daughter works as a warrant officer. They both have families, and we are blessed with grandchildren. Our lives seemed perfect, or at least that's what I thought. I never had any reason to doubt my wife's loyalty, nor did I ever suspect her of anything. I always treated her with love and care. I never raised my voice at her, and she was never denied anything she wanted. I took great pleasure in giving her gifts, because I truly loved her. Our intimacy was always fulfilling, and we had a strong, meaningful connection. My wife, Natasha, has aged beautifully, never relying on cosmetic treatments. It's a joy to have such an attractive woman by my side. But I soon realized I wasn't the only one who thought so. Natasha has been working at a pharmaceutical company for the past 15 years, as the head of the marketing department. Her job often required her to travel, especially in the last 5 years. Some of her business trips would last for months, as she managed the supply of medication to pharmacies, particularly in the busy cities of Siberia. Despite being away on her business trips, Natasha always made sure to call me almost every day, telling me how much she missed me and the children. Around the same time, our metallurgical company had secured a contract with our partners in Krasnoyarsk to supply welded pipes for an oil pipeline. As the Deputy General Director, it was my job to travel there and finalize the deal. It was during this trip that everything changed. After we signed the contract, we went to the General Director's office. As is customary, there were drinks and light refreshments on the table. On the CEO's desk, I noticed a few photographs, one of which immediately caught my attention. It was a picture of the office owner with a stunning red-haired woman, who I recognized as my wife Natasha. To say that I was shocked would be an understatement. I tried to stay composed, gathering all my strength to ask casually about the person in the photo. The General Director proudly told me that she was his beloved partner, with whom he had been for 4 years. He even suggested that we continue the celebration at his country estate, where I would meet his live-in partner. As we drove to his estate, he spoke highly of her, praising her domestic skills. However, he mentioned one flaw. She often had to leave to care for her sick mother, which caused her to be absent at times. Still, he was optimistic about their future together. As I listened to him, my heart raced in my chest, threatening to choke me. A wave of fear swept over me, and a dark thought briefly crossed my mind. But deep down, I knew he was innocent in this matter. When we arrived at the mansion, the General Director invited me inside. I could tell from the redness on my face that something was wrong. Struggling to find my words, I muttered that I wasn't feeling well. When we entered the dining room, the General Director introduced me to his wife, Natasha. The moment our eyes met, Natasha froze. Her breath caught in her throat, and her face drained of color. Slowly, she collapsed to the floor. Her companion quickly caught her, preventing her from falling. It became clear that I had posed a threat to them both. Realizing the danger, I knew I had to leave right away. Without saying a word, I turned and fled from the mansion. I hailed a cab just in time, grabbed my things from the hotel, and rushed to the airport, using every bit of energy to get a ticket for the next available flight. It wasn't until I sat on the plane that my racing mind started to settle. Throughout the flight, one question repeated over and over in my head, echoing like the beat of my heart. Why would she do this to me? The details of my return home are a blur, lost in a fog of confusion and disbelief, that I walked around my apartment restlessly, unable to stay still. I kept repeating the same haunting question in my mind. Why? I couldn't find peace, whether sitting or lying down. My legs ached from the constant pacing, and my heart, which had once been pounding, now rumbled ominously. It would occasionally fall into an abyss of dread. Then, a sharp and intense pain gripped my chest, and my consciousness began to slip away. It was my driver who found me. He had grown concerned when I didn't appear at the usual time for work. Using his spare key, he unlocked the apartment and found me unconscious on the floor. He immediately called an ambulance. Thankfully, the medical intervention worked, and it was determined that the irregular rhythm of my heart was due to the strain of overwhelming emotions, causing the severe chest pain. I spent around 3 weeks in the hospital. During that time, Natasha tried to reach me several times. However, I chose not to answer her calls, eventually turning off my phone entirely. When I got home, I turned my phone back on, and it rang immediately. It was Natasha, speaking rapidly, trying to explain herself, begging for my forgiveness while also accusing me of wrongdoing. The conversation ended with her screaming that she and our children meant everything to her, that her love was only for me, and that she was begging me to forgive her. I listened in silence until she was done, then I disconnected the call. I couldn't handle it anymore. For 4 years, my wife had been living a double life, spinning a web of lies and deceit, while fearing that the truth would come out. Despite her apparent love for me, and her relationship with a prominent figure in the oil industry, she had been leading a parallel life. Had I only been a backup plan to her? All this time, our children had been searching for answers, but I was too afraid and ashamed to reveal the truth, even though I knew it was inevitable. A month later, Natasha returned, still hoping she could somehow convince me to forgive her. After listening to her for about an hour, I called our son and daughter. When they arrived, I told Natasha she should tell them the truth herself. The children sat in silence, listening to her disjointed explanation. She said that I hadn't given her enough attention, that I hadn't seen her as a woman, and that this had driven her to seek love elsewhere. She claimed it was a love stronger than her loyalty to our family. Still, she professed her deep love for us and begged for forgiveness. Our son was the first to speak. "Mom, what you did was cruel, to both us and Dad. It's up to him to decide, but I can't forgive you." Our daughter stood silently, tears streaming down her face. She left the room without saying a word. Natasha seemed to understand the weight of the situation. Her posture slumped, and without looking at me, she left the apartment. I watched from the window as my wife descended the stairs and got into a waiting taxi. She had returned to her lover in Crest Nears. 6 months later, she came back, having lost her new husband in a car accident. His children quickly kicked her out of their estate, leaving her with no other choice but to return to our city. She tried to contact me several times, but I refused to speak to her. The children also ignored her calls. Now, Natasha lives in her parents' apartment and works at a pharmacy. I have no idea about her personal life or what's going on with her. She has her secrets just as I have mine.